You wake up each morning and put on a mask, silently crafting yourself to match the expectations placed upon you. As you step into the world, the question hovers unspoken in every glance, every conversation, every subtle judgment. Who are you? But behind the roles you perform, the dutiful child, the agreeable partner, the responsible worker, you secretly tremble with uncertainty. You say yes while you're screaming no inside. Beneath every courteous smile, every nod of assent, there is a lingering shadow of doubt whispering, "Is this really me?" Maybe you've been taught that identity is something clear-cut, something stable and certain. You were conditioned early on to define yourself through the eyes of others. Their approval became your validation, their critique, your condemnation. Slowly but surely, you've given away pieces of your truth, hoping that each surrender might finally yield acceptance. Yet each compromise has only distanced you further from yourself, turning clarity into confusion, inner peace into silent despair. How long will you keep living this way? Living as though your identity is negotiable currency, exchanged to buy fleeting comfort, temporary belonging. The weariness you feel is real. It's the ache of disconnection, a profound homesickness for a self you scarcely recognize anymore, a self you've buried beneath layers of conformity and fear. In quieter moments, the discomfort surfaces. It whispers that something essential is missing, something intangible yet vital, an authenticity lost along the way. It nudges you gently yet persistently, asking whether your carefully sculpted persona is worth the sacrifice of genuine selfhood. You long for a feeling of wholeness, but you scarcely know where to begin. This isn't about vanity or rebellion. This is a longing for integrity, a hunger to reclaim what you've inadvertently relinquished. This yearning isn't a sign of weakness. It's a profound awareness. It's your soul's way of signaling that true identity can't be borrowed or bought. Identity is not about fitting neatly into someone else's narrative. It's about rediscovering the unspoken truth within you. So the world will continue to ask you who you are. And until you answer with honesty, until you bravely strip away the masks and layers you've been hiding behind, the world will eagerly provide an answer for you. An answer crafted from
You carry within you a deeply ingrained belief that by now you should be settled, certain, complete. Society tells you this story repeatedly. Success measured by milestones checked off early, identity firmly locked in place before the calendar flips to 40. Maybe you've believed that if you haven't arrived yet, you've failed. You've watched others seemingly have it all figured out, their lives neatly packaged and confidently displayed. Meanwhile, you wrestle with doubts and the uncomfortable sensation of being perpetually unfinished. You think this must be a flaw, a sign you've wasted precious time. But what if this belief is a mirage, a false narrative designed to keep you small? What if the idea of arriving early is not a sign of strength, but a kind of limitation? Maybe you've been taught that the earlier you have your life figured out, the more successful you are. But what if the truth is that rushing to settle into a fixed identity before the fullness of your experience has matured only leaves you fragmented? You say yes to this narrative because it promises security, but inside it breeds anxiety. You clutch to the illusion of certainty while your inner world begs for exploration. You measure yourself by external standards that flatten the richness of your becoming into a checklist of accomplishments. This is not absence, this is presence. You are in the midst of a transformation, not a failure. The pressure to have it all by a certain age traps you in a premature conclusion. You become afraid of change, afraid to embrace the unknown. This fear makes you mimic others' paths, adopt identities that are not truly yours, and suppress the deeper stirrings of your soul. You feel fragmented because you are living in contradiction between the version the world expects and the self that is still emerging beneath the surface. This is a profound moment of tension. You must decide whether to cling to the false comfort of certainty or to embrace the messy, unfolding process of growth. What if your real life, your authentic becoming, doesn't begin until you allow yourself to be incomplete? How long will you keep living according to a script that demands answers before you are ready? You are caught between the comfort of the known and the vastness of possibility. The story you've been told about when life begins is not your truth. The early years are not the peak, but the groundwork, the necessary research before the real work of becoming whole. It is time to challenge the lie that your worth depends on having arrived early, and instead trust that your unfolding is a sacred journey that can only fully begin when you are ready to meet yourself deeply.
Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." At the heart of Jung's philosophy lies a profound understanding. Identity is not merely something you create, it's something you discover. Your true identity, according to Jung, emerges not from external affirmations or social validation, but from an inward, often challenging journey of integrating all aspects of your psyche, including those you have long rejected or hidden away. Jung emphasized that beneath your conscious facade lies what he termed the shadow, the parts of yourself that you've suppressed or denied, the fragments of personality you've pushed down, because they're uncomfortable, socially unacceptable, or painful. Your shadow isn't inherently negative or dangerous. Rather, it's simply the collection of traits and truths you've buried in pursuit of approval and belonging. Yet, your shadow holds immense wisdom, offering clues to the deepest truths of your identity. You might recognize your shadow when envy unexpectedly arises within you, or anger surges in a seemingly trivial situation. Perhaps you feel a surge of shame or guilt over desires and impulses you've been taught to reject. Jung understood these feelings as signals, messengers from your unconscious trying to remind you of forgotten parts of yourself. Ignoring these signals doesn't make them disappear. Instead, it makes them louder, more persistent, and increasingly disruptive to your sense of self. To Jung, identity formation involves embracing these shadowed elements rather than rejecting them. It means becoming whole by bringing into conscious awareness everything you've tried to hide. Your task isn't to purge imperfections or become flawless, but rather to cultivate authenticity by integrating all dimensions of yourself, both the admirable and the troubling. This inward journey requires courage. It means acknowledging painful truths and difficult emotions, admitting your vulnerabilities, and accepting responsibility for your choices. You'll have to confront discomfort and uncertainty. But what awaits at the other end is a profound sense of inner peace and clarity, an integrated identity strong enough to withstand external pressures and judgments. Jung described this integration process as individuation, the transformative journey through which every day, the struggle to define yourself manifests subtly, hidden in the ordinary details of your routine. You notice it in the unease that accompanies a casual conversation, the vague sense of dread as you agree to something you secretly resent, or the muted anxiety that arises whenever someone asks, "What do you really want?" These moments seem small, fleeting, and insignificant, but they quietly reveal a deeper pattern. Each instance of discomfort or hesitation is an echo of your suppressed truth, your unconscious self striving to be heard. Think of how often you modify your words or soften your stance to accommodate others' expectations. Consider how frequently you sacrifice your genuine desires to maintain superficial harmony. Each time you yield to external demands without authentic reflection, you reinforce the false belief that your identity must be secondary, that your inner truth matters less than others' perceptions. At work, this might mean biting your tongue to keep the peace, agreeing to tasks that drain your spirit because you fear appearing difficult. Among family, it might involve maintaining traditions and roles that no longer resonate, yet feeling trapped by a sense of obligation. Even in friendships, you might subtly edit yourself, hiding vulnerabilities or ambitions to avoid judgment or rejection. On the surface, these compromises appear harmless, mere acts of diplomacy or kindness. But beneath, they steadily corrode your connection to yourself. This hidden pattern creates a silent crisis. Your identity becomes fragmented, scattered across countless compromises, until you lose sight of who you truly are. The person you present to the world might seem acceptable, even admirable, but internally, you sense a growing gap between appearance and reality. You begin to doubt your own perceptions, your emotions becoming increasingly hard to decipher because you've grown so adept at dismissing them. This disconnection leads to anxiety, restlessness, and a persistent yet elusive dissatisfaction. In this subtle, daily self-betrayal lies the insidious trap. The more you suppress your authenticity, the more elusive your true self becomes. The longer you allow external demands to dictate your identity. To reclaim your true identity is not simply an intellectual exercise. It is an act of emotional bravery, one requiring tangible, heartfelt actions. Practical strategies for change are essential, but they must go beyond mere cliches. Instead, they must invite you to reconnect deeply with your inner wisdom and unearth clarity from within. Begin by cultivating awareness. Gentle, persistent attention to your internal state. Whenever you sense discomfort, pause. Instead of immediately dismissing your feelings or rushing to suppress them, allow space for curiosity. Ask yourself gently, what am I really feeling right now? What truth is my discomfort trying to show me? By acknowledging and accepting these internal signals without judgment, you create a sanctuary within yourself, an inner refuge where your authentic self can safely emerge. Next, courageously explore your shadow, the parts of yourself you habitually ignore or reject. Write freely and without censorship about the impulses, desires, and fears you've buried. Rather than fearing these hidden parts, approach them with compassion and curiosity. Carl Jung reminds you that integration is not about eliminating uncomfortable truths, but rather embracing them. As you explore your shadow honestly, you'll discover that it contains not only wounds, but strengths, qualities you've overlooked or underestimated. Embracing these hidden aspects will illuminate a richer, more authentic identity. Another powerful strategy involves consciously setting boundaries rooted in your truth, not in external demands. Boundaries aren't walls of rejection, they're affirmations of self-respect. Begin with small, deliberate choices, saying no to commitments that drain you, or politely declining requests that feel misaligned with your values. At first, you might feel fear or guilt when asserting these boundaries, but persist. Remind yourself that every boundary you set from a place of genuine clarity strengthens your inner voice and affirms your right to authentic selfhood. Finally, reconnect intentionally with, but as you move toward wholeness, a strange tension emerges. You begin to notice the world rewarding performance over truth, imitation over integrity. You meet people who seem to be doing the work, speaking of boundaries, authenticity, healing, yet something feels off. Their selfhood feels rehearsed, their confidence brittle, and you begin to wonder, what separates genuine transformation from its imitation? The answer lies in intention and depth. True growth comes quietly. It doesn't seek applause. It isn't broadcasted with curated captions or performed in the name of self-image. Performative change is a shell, empty, polished, easy to replicate. It mimics the language of healing without enduring the pain. It wears the mask of authenticity while still hiding from the shadow. You can feel it in people who are fluent in the right words, but still avoid the real conversations. In those who preach boundaries, yet use them as shields to avoid intimacy. In those who reject conformity loudly, but still secretly crave approval. In subtler ways, Jung understood this phenomenon well. The ego is cunning. It can adapt to any ideology, even the language of individuation, and twist it into a new performance. Instead of genuinely facing the unconscious, the ego might inflate itself with spiritual superiority or intellectual detachment. Rather than becoming whole, the self becomes inflated, driven not by integration, but by the hunger to appear enlightened, evolved, different. But deep down, the core remains untouched, the wound unhealed. You too may be tempted by this false version of growth. It's understandable. Real transformation is messy and slow. It's often invisible to others, and in a world obsessed with instant validation, it can be deeply tempting to adopt the appearance of change without doing the deeper work. You may start to craft an identity based on. There comes a moment, quiet, unceremonious, when you feel it. Not a thunderous epiphany, Not a cinematic breakthrough, but a gentle, grounded shift. Something clicks into place. You've spent so long searching for yourself in reflections, in reactions, in the echoes of other people's needs, that the return to your own center feels almost unfamiliar. But there it is. Still, patient, waiting for you. You no longer rush to explain yourself. You no longer contort your truth to ease others' discomfort. When someone disapproves or misunderstands, it still stings, but it no longer uproots you. You've discovered something more stable than approval, self-recognition, and it feels like home. Carl Jung spoke of individuation not as perfection, but as integration. You begin to understand this now, not in theory, but in your bones. You no longer divide yourself into good and bad, acceptable and unacceptable. You begin to weave together every fragmented part, the ambitious self, the insecure self, the nurturing one, the angry one, even the versions of you've tried to erase, especially those. They are all yours, and none are accidents. They are pieces of a mosaic that only makes sense when seen whole. You don't need to declare your transformation. You simply begin living differently. You listen more closely to your instincts. You honor your limits without apology. You create not to impress, but to express. You leave situations that once fed your fear and seek out ones that nourish your soul. The outer changes might be subtle, a shift in posture, a new boundary held with quiet firmness, but inside, a revolution. So now, the question comes again, not from the world, but from within. Who are you? This time, the answer doesn't rush forward in practiced words or pleasing gestures. It rises slowly, anchored in quiet truth. You are not what others expected. You are not a role, not a reflection, not a reaction. You are the culmination of every choice you've made to come home to yourself. You are the courage to sit in silence rather than perform. You are the voice that once trembled but now speaks, with clarity, even if softly. You are the wholeness you once feared you'd never find. You are no longer waiting to be named. You are naming yourself, and it hasn't come easily. You have faced rejection, not always from others, but from the parts of yourself you once tried to abandon. You've walked through guilt, through the loneliness of leaving behind the false selves that earned you approval. But with each loss, you gained something deeper: integrity, freedom, presence. You've stopped trying to fit into a shape that was never yours, and instead, you've begun shaping your life around your truth. This is not a final arrival, not the end of a journey, but the beginning of a new way of being, one that doesn't waver when others question you, one that doesn't collapse when you're misunderstood. Your foundation is internal now. You are no longer held together by validation. You are held together by self-awareness, by your willingness to walk toward wholeness again and again, no matter how many times you lose your way. The world may still ask you who you are, and some days you might forget. You might still feel pulled.